few different conferences as well. So the way we're going to go this evening is Ben's got a lot of wonderful things he's going to share. And then Peter Norvig is going to be a respondent for a few minutes. And then I really hope all of you get a chance to make your comments and ask questions as well. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let Ben try to share his screen.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you for welcoming me here, and thank you for Peter for joining me. I look forward to the discussion, and for the rest of you. Coming to Bay Kai is like coming home for me. I've been coming and speaking regularly over a long time, so it's very happy to be here. This feels like my people all around here, and so I'm really happy to do this pitch for you. And it is also exciting for me. This is what I'm into these days, and so let me get to it. And I should share that screen. Okay. There we go. Okay, so that's for Bay Kai. That's the story. Ted said, yes, I'm at University of Maryland, and always proud to represent the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. Ted's right that I did found it, but it's now on its 8th director, Nicholas Elmquist. So he's running the show, and I'm enjoying doing what I like doing. As you can see by my background, I'm in beautiful Vancouver, where we've been since January 2020, a good place to hide out during COVID and during the previous administration. What was his name? And so we've been here, and that's worked out really well. And so that's the view of the downtown and the mountains behind. But the Human-Computer Interaction, oh, you're not seeing that. Well, yes, you are. The Human-Computer Interaction Lab at the University of Maryland is a wonderful interdisciplinary community that's led the way in a lot of things, and a lot of different groups on campus, computer science and College of Information Studies especially, but these other groups as well as the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities, MIF, a wonderfully titled group. Ted's mentioned my work in the book, Designing the User Interface, now in 6th edition, required 5 people to tell the story of the remarkable growth of this discipline from a moderate-sized group of people starting around 1980, whose work triggered the growth of things like the web and mobile devices and graphic user interfaces. It's been a great ride, and direct manipulation was my coinage around 1981, 82. That really became the theme that drove a lot of my work, as I'm going to mention. And those debates with Patty Moss were actually in 1997, so they have even a little more history. But we got back together in 2017 and 2021. There was a return for that at the CHI conference. So some of you know me from the book, but that's my calling card. My other calling cards and my claims to fame are some of these little things that turned out to have a big impact. Sometimes it works that way. The little things have big impact. The idea of highlighted links embedded within a paragraph that were clickable. And we designed that. It was 84.5, and the light blue color turned out to be a good design. The ones which had bright red were noticed by the viewers, the users, but they just couldn't concentrate on reading the content enough. So the light blue worked out, and we built products using that, including the July 88 issue of the Communication, the ACM, was a hypertext document. Tim Berners-Lee saw that, and he cited that in his Spring 89 manifesto for the web. And so that's how it became light blue on the web. We also developed early touch screens. And at the time, 1-inch buttons and 9-inch wide keyboards were typical. We made a 7-inch, a 5-inch, and then we got to a 3-inch. And you did it by touching the screen and then sliding your finger around, and it activated on lift off. And Steve Jobs visited our lab in October 88, saw this and a bunch of other things, and I became a consultant for Apple for 5 years. And so that's some of the story of how it traveled, but it's one of the cute stories. If you have something sufficiently new, people don't believe it. And one of the reviewers for the journal article didn't believe we could do this thing. and we had to make a video to send to the reviewer to convince them. I'm also the holder of the patent for tagging in photos. In this original version where you drag the name and it sticks on the screen, now of course tagging is done by face recognition and other strategies, but those things were kind of things that had it was great fun because it was small ideas, but they really had a big impact. And there were lessons in that. But as Ted mentioned, most of my work is on visualization, and the Spotfire work was the mid-90s, and formed a company in 97, grew to 200 people, and it was bought by Tibco and remains one of the premier tools. Tableau, our friends at Tableau at Stanford, who've spoken at BayChi as well, have been hugely successful in their approach. But the early work we did on Spotfire of dynamic queries with double box sliders and the multiple coordinated window strategies were things we developed for Spotfire. And it's just a satisfying thing to see its continuing success. The tree maps were also my idea. This is an application with for financial visualization. It shows 500 stocks in the stock market, and the area encodes the market capitalization. So Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon are strong. Green, the color, shows it's risen since yesterday, and red is what's fallen. So you can see the 11 industry sectors. You can see the anomalies of what was going down when that sector was going up, and you can see which sectors were going down in general. We also spent a long time working on Node Excel, team led by Mark Smith of the Social Media Research Foundation, still in Mountain View. You should get him to talk for BayChi. Yeah, there's a good one. Get Mark Smith. And it's become the most popular tool for teaching network analysis and visualization. And our book on Node Excel is in second edition. And in the last decade, event flow became a tool for event sequence analysis, such as medical histories. So that's where I come from. But today, take a breath, look at the sunshine, and we're going to take a look at the future and where things are going. And where I think they're going is human-centered AI. And the question is, what is human-centered AI? Well, there's going to be a lot to define it, and I will get to that. But the basic goal is to revisit with clarity and strength the existing ideas that the goal of design of any technology, but AI design as well, to amplify, to augment, to empower, and enhance people. And so maybe the distinction between AI and HCI is that AI measures and evaluates algorithms and their performance. And HCI designs and measures and evaluates human performance. Now bring those together and you have something really terrific. And that's what I think the future holds, is the powerful machine learning and deep learning algorithms of the past decade will become much more widely adopted and put into use when they have good user interface designs that guide the principles and the strategies for using them. So that's the high level goal. And we're going to break it down into a lot of pieces here. Of course, we speak up for human values, human rights. We want justice. We want dignity. We want all the technology to support the good things that we want in the world for people. But we're going to do this by taking care of individuals, and we're going to support their self-efficacy, their creativity, responsibility, and social connections. People are, after all, social beings. And that's going to be a driving force in understanding and distinguishing what AI and HCI contribute. And we really want to bring people together, okay? So the design aspirations are going to be that we want it to be reliable, safe, and trustworthy. There's about 25 words that describe what people want. These are difficult to measure and assess. That's a whole separate story, but I'm involved in efforts to do that. And I'm going to offer tonight a set of recommendations about what software engineering teams do, what the organizations that they work in can do, and in building a safety culture, how each industry will distinguish itself, and then what the role for government regulation and intervention will be. At every step of the way, we think about who the stakeholders are. There are about 30 different categories of stakeholders, but I've summarized by saying the researchers, the developers, the business leaders, policymakers, and the vast numbers of potential users. We always want to think about what they're doing, and we do it in the context of thinking of the threats. The threats from malicious actors and adversarial attacks, and the threats from terrorists, political oppressors, etc. We need to be constantly aware of how we can design systems that reduce the impact of those threats and reduce the bias that can come from poor data and unrepresentative data, and the threats that come from flawed software. So those are things that keep us going. My approach is 3 parts to it. There's going to be the HCI framework, which gives us a fresh view that changes the direction. I'm going to describe how that works, that sets up 2 dimensions of how to think about human and computer usage. And then we're going to go through design metaphors and a fresh set of words, languages, and images about what I think the future of computing will be. And then the governance structures, which will help put these things into place. There's 15 recommendations in there. We'll only have time for a few of them tonight. As Ted mentioned, this is for a book I'm working on in production with Oxford University Press for publication in January 2022. But you can go to the website that has the table of contents and information about it, and will give you a good taste of what's to come. And this talk is really meant to give you a good taste. And actually, one of my pleasures in giving this talk, when I think about the BayChi communities, it pushed me along to think through some things and change some things that are now going to be reflected in the updates I put into the book when I get the copy edits back in a few weeks. All right, so the first story is the HCI framework. Remember, we've got 3 pieces to this puzzle, and the HCI framework takes us back 40 years to Tom Sheridan's notion of levels of automation or levels of autonomy, an important notion. And Bill Verplank, one of the BayChi area people as well, was a grad student with Tom Sheridan working on it. And when I did the first edition of my book in 1986, I described that notion of levels of automation. And I talked about balancing automation and human control, because you had to choose some point along that scale. That was the notion, that you got from 10 levels of full human control to full computer automation. That was the notion. And your job was to figure out where to stake your claim, where to lay it down. And the assumption was that if you had more automation, you had less human control. Well, a few years later, I began to question that. Well, I should say further, that idea has propagated. The 10 levels of automation that Tom Sheridan put forward were widely cited and reproduced in a way in the 6 levels of driving automation from the Society of Automotive Engineers. Another misleading notion of design. We can do a lot better than this, and that's what I want to show. So in later editions of the book, that section of the book was changed to ensuring human control while increasing automation. Now, when I first wrote that, I wasn't sure what I meant. And I had to think of the examples, and I began to get closer and closer in touch. It took me, it's what Steve Johnson calls a slow hunch. I sort of knew that this was right, but I didn't know what it meant. And it took a while till I began to explore it. And what it meant, finally, I came to see, was there really were 2 separable dimensions. You could have varying degrees of human control and varying degrees of computer automation. And the goal was to get high levels of human control and high levels of automation. It seems mystical now, but I'm going to try to show you how to accomplish that. And the way I'm going to represent it, preferably, is as 2-dimensional representation, where we can we'll look at 4 quadrants, and our goal is to get to reliable, safe, and trustworthy, which I suggest is here in the upper right. And the kind of systems we want, let's take simple cases of an elevator or a digital camera. The camera is my favorite example. You take out your camera, you point it where you want to, you adjust the zoom, and you click for your decisive moment. It's your picture. You took that picture. It's your creative act. You feel empowered and capable of doing it. And the digital cameras transformed the world where 5 to 10% of the people were photographers to where 90 to 95% of people are photographers. And they got good pictures. Why? Because the underlying technology was automated. It automated the focus, it automated the aperture, reduced the hand jitter. And so you got a wonderful combination here of human control of the things that mattered for the person, for the human, for the photographer. And you got the boost and assistance of automation that the machine provided when it could be reliable, safe, and trustworthy. Now, that's really the key message. And elevators and a lot of other products, we'll take a look at some of them, have the same idea. They build a sense of reliable, safe, and trustworthiness because you get a high degree of control of what you care about, and you have a high degree of automation for the other items. And so it's the design strategy is to parcel out the features and the aspects and the attributes and the components of a system and decide what is it that the humans need to do and be in control of, and what is it that you can have automated. So let's go through this a little more. There are times we're going to want high degrees of computer control, and they were things like, you know, a pacemaker in the older styles were had to be fully automated. You didn't have control over them. And then airbag deployments should be in 200 milliseconds. There's no human intervention. So sometimes the speed and sometimes the importance of things, saving lives, life critical in these applications, mean you have to have a higher degree of automation. And so that requires a different set of design principles for software engineers. But there's also situations where you want high levels of human mastery, where you want to ride your bicycle and play your piano. You want to do it. You want the sense of self-efficacy. And you may have seen, maybe Peter was involved in this, but Google's April Fool's a video a few years ago was of a self-driving bicycle, which, you know, was a hysterical and cleverly done piece, because what it did is emphasize the sense that the purpose of a bicycle was to let you ride the bicycle. Okay, and we have places of low human control and low automation, music box, the old-fashioned wind-up music box, and also the dangers of landmines. So those are a little bit of that, but let's take a few, let me add to this. On the periphery, we have to remember there are dangers of excessive automation, exemplified by the Boeing 737 MAX, where the automation was so great for the MCAS system that the pilots didn't even know it existed. And when you do that degree of automation, it's clearly, you know, asking for trouble and dangerous. And so that's what led to the two disastrous air crashes of the 737 MAX. Too much automation. And we see too much automation in other applications as well. We also have the dangers of excessive human control. And so good design involves, you know, putting in the interlocks and the guides and the restrictions that prevent people from doing bad things. For example, your self-cleaning oven, if the temperature is above 600 degrees Fahrenheit, you can't open the door. Okay, it prevents a dangerous situation from happening. Almost every technology has many of these interlocks that prevent wrong things from happening. We need more of those. Positive train control would be a way of increasing the automation so as to restrict human performance but ensure safety. Okay, so that's the general framework. We'll take a look at a few applications. The old-fashioned morphine drip bag of World War II days was a plastic bag with a tube that dripped morphine at a regular basis. It was a wonderful thing, but it had its dangers. Either too little morphine, which meant you were still writhing in pain, or too much morphine, which could potentially be deadly. And so the solution at first was an automatic dispenser, which did measure your heart rate or breathing rate, and would dispense the morphine to you, so you would prevent the dangers of getting too much morphine. However, pain is what you want to try to prevent, and the patients would be suffering. And so the next move was to give humans control by patient-guided dispensers. These PCAs, patient-controlled analgesic systems, allow you to squeeze and get an extra dose of morphine, but it too limits the total amount you can get over a period of time and the speed and the time in between each dose that you can get. And so that design began to help make it better. And the movement in the medical instruments world is to have patient-guided but clinician-monitored notions, where there might be a central control room that monitored 50 or so of these devices across a hospital and could see where things were going well and where things were going poorly. So that kind of control center adds another part to reliable, safe, and trustworthy when someone is reviewing the performance of a highly automated device. So those are the strategies of this, thinking of these two-dimensional layout that I hope will guide you in design of other products. Think of the ways in which you want high levels of human control, or the ways or the situations you want high levels of computer control, and then search for the strategies that allow you to get the best of both. And I think that's where the future is going to go. And we'll take a look at some more examples in a moment. So the next thing is the design metaphors that fit in with the notions here. It meant for me an updating of what were the common ways of thinking about design of advanced systems, especially AI-based systems. And this summary tells you about the design metaphors. On one side, we have the extreme cases of the intelligent agent, the thinking machine, cognitive actors, or what, and the words about humanoid robots or social robots, simulated teammates. The notion of teammates, collaborators, or partners have become strong in recent years. And then the notion of autonomous systems. And so those are one set of metaphors that have become very popular. And I want to steer this community to think about a new set of metaphors of super tools, active appliances, telebots, and control centers. I think that's what will guide our design in the future. We can take advantage of the strategies that AI may have created with these, with the algorithms that are part of the machine learning and deep learning community. But I think we want to create the user interfaces that will give people this sense of control of what's happening and an understanding of what's going on. So my favorite example is the cell phone camera, where you get a high degree of control before you take the picture. While you're taking the picture, you point it where you want to, you zoom, and you click for that decisive moment. But again, the AI system behind it is providing focus and aperture control, and jitter reduction. Afterwards, you also have a high degree of control. There's a dozen different functions you can do to change the lighting, the saturation, the contrast, the luminance, the brightness, etc. And you can continue to do that at any time you want after you've taken the picture. Also, digital cell phone cameras provide the social mechanisms that make it easy to share images that you've taken. Similarly, Google or Apple's GPS navigation system gives you the same kind of idea. I decide I want to go from the White House downtown in DC to College Park, 8 miles away. And it gives me a choice of 3 routes, and it gives me real-time information about where the bottlenecks are and estimated times. And I can choose from the 3 routes that it gives, and then I get the preview and on I go. And so here again, I have user control of the things I want, of course, the destination, and I can choose by car, by public transportation, by biking, by walking, whatever you want. So there's a great deal of flexibility that's built into these apps. Similarly, the successful apps of text auto completion and search query completion. I start typing University of Maryland, and I get a bunch of suggested possibilities. I'm still in control, but I've gotten the boost of having the machine learning algorithms provide me a set of choices that would be reasonable. But I could reject them all and keep typing, or I can choose them. Spelling corrections are the same idea. It points out where there might be some improvements or there might be a mistake, but it's up to the user. The user remains in control. So these are the beginnings of, these are good examples of super tools. And there's lots of them. There's sort of a big example of the Bloomberg terminal. I've lately had the chance to learn a good deal more about Bloomberg terminal. Every day, Bloomberg takes in 1.6 million articles on business and organizes them using natural language processing and AI algorithms to present them in ways that will be relevant to the 325,000 people who pay $20,000 a year to have this on their desk. The typical design, again, under user control, is spatially stable, non-overlap tile displays, multiple coordinated windows that provide large amounts of information abundant displays in compact and well-organized designs. I think the future is a lot more visual, and these give great examples of what the success stories will be in the future. The active appliances are the humble kitchen appliances we now have, which increasingly have machine learning and AI built into them, down to your coffee maker and your dishwasher and your clothes washer, which monitors the water temperature, the cloudiness of the water, and makes sure you get the clothes done in the way that you want. And the same for dryers and all the increasing number of household appliances. And maybe we should include the Nest thermostat there as another example of the way these active appliances are going. And the pacemaker, which used to be an autonomous device, is becoming an active appliance. It may be implanted, but you now have control over it by way of your cell phone, and possibly your clinician, physician, can monitor it, and the manufacturer might be collecting data from tens of thousands of pacemakers so they can understand what works and what doesn't work and how to improve it. And so that's a new direction for when I see the future of these technologies. The third category, the telebots or teleoperated devices, but I would call the Mars rover a telebot. Now, you might get some complaint from NASA JPL people, some who want to tell you it's autonomous. And yes, it has certain degrees of autonomy. It can move and avoid obstacles and avoid precipices. It does a lot of functioning on its own, but there's a whole control room of people at NASA JPL who make decisions about what it's to do next. And they also monitor performance of the systems, and they intervene when things are going badly. So there's a good mixture here. I'll call it a telebot. It's like a drone would be a telebot as well. A drone has a high degree of automation. It can hover, it can orbit, it can return to base, it can follow waypoints, but ultimately it's under human control. And a nice balance, the success of drones is that they give a great balance between what humans want to do and what the machine can offer to make them do even more than they did before. Another telebot would be the Da Vinci surgical system, a really impressive line of tools. And it's often written up in the newspapers as robot surgery. Robots did your surgery, but the manufacturer is very clear and says robots don't perform surgery. Your surgeon performs surgery with Da Vinci by using instruments that he or she guides via a console. So these are remarkable ways of amplifying human abilities. The physician, the surgeon can make extremely precise motions at very hard to reach parts of the human body so as to make less invasive surgical techniques that result in better surgery and in more rapid healing. And so that's another great example of what I think we should be talking about as telebots. Control centers, I've already shown you this hospital control center, which gives an idea of how a hospital manages its facilities from the emergency room through the intensive care units and the long-term patient monitoring. And here, Counterterrorism Center, again, the notion that people are working together, they're communicating, they're helping each other, but they have a vast amount of information that enables them to make competent decisions. I guess my principle here is in this bumper sticker. It says humans in the group, computers in the loop. That's my design strategy, which says that you're going to have people, you want to facilitate people working together because they're social people and they need advice, they need help, and so on. And we do want the computers in the loop. So that's the strategy there. All right, and I'm going to push on to the third of these supports, the governance structures. There's 15 recommendations, but I'm going to just deal with 2 of them tonight. They're organized into 4 levels of these ovals. There's the team structures for reliable systems, the software engineering teams, and we'll talk about the technical practices there a little bit more. But around each organization may have dozens of teams, and that organization has to build a safety culture. And that's the job of the leadership, the vision statement, mission statement. It's the way hiring is done. It's the way training is done, allocation of resources, and so on. It's visible in the attention to failures and the reporting of failures and the reporting of near misses. Near misses happen a lot more often, but if you track them and you know what the near misses are, you can prevent the failures from happening. We'll talk, internal reviews and industry standards, the ACM and the IEEE's P7000 series of standards are setting good guidelines for how AI systems should be not only implemented, but evaluated. The next oval is the industry level of trustworthy certification by external reviews. And this may be controversial in some circles. Sometimes Eric Schmidt of Google has said, oh, Ben, you'd be very impressed by how carefully we develop our AI systems. And I am impressed by how carefully they do. And I am impressed by Google's people in AI research, and especially their guidelines book. However, it's again and again clear that having external reviewers complements it. It's very much the same way that auditing firms do external audits, independent audits of the financial structure of all the 10,000 companies that are publicly listed. It's the Securities and Exchange Commission mandates that. So the internal review is known to be not enough, and the external review makes that, and the independent audit is really an important issue. It's imperfect. We know about the great failures like Enron, but the overall history of independent oversight is a virtuous and positive one. There's an interesting role for insurance companies in assessing what goes on. I mean, I think that the way to think about it is a self-driving car issue. Do you think that insurance companies will have higher premiums or lower premiums for self-driving cars? If they had higher premiums, that would send a scary message to consumers, and maybe it would push the companies to develop safer cars. If they had a lower premium, that would also be impressive. But the fact is, the insurance companies are struggling because they just don't know. So I might ask you, how many deaths do you think there have been associated with Tesla cars? Anybody have any? Sort of hard to ask here. Anybody know, or anybody guess how many deaths with Tesla cars?
I think maybe 2.
Maybe 2, 3 is said, or 5, or 10, or 15. That's what I thought. But there is a website called tesladeaths.com. You might want to check it. tesladeaths.com. Last time I looked, there were 182 deaths. Now, to be fair to Tesla, we don't really know how many of them were done, of those deaths occurred while autopilot was on. We know about the famous 2016 crash that the National Transportation Safety Board investigated. And so we know about that one, and we know about a few others. But the 182 deaths were collected from international reports, open reports online in newspapers, on websites, and so on. So most of those are incomplete, and we don't really know how many deaths were caused during autopilot. We do know the National Highway Safety Transportation Administration has a database with 122 sudden unintended accelerations of Teslas. And the typical one is you drive up to your garage, and while you're waiting for the door to open, your car accelerates, smashing through the door and coming to a rest in the back at the concrete wall of your garage. Tesla claims these are all due to driver errors. Not obvious to me, but we just don't really know. And so the insurance companies, who are supposed to be the certifiers in some way, which they are in building industry and medical and transportation, don't have the data yet, and that's what they need to do. There are other roles for NGOs and civil society and professional societies, and then government regulation. One comment about that is to say that while industry in the Valley has often been opposed to regulation, there is a change of attitude. Facebook recently suggested they would like more regulation. They've added an oversight board. It's not quite an independent oversight board, but it's an oversight board. And so we're seeing how these ideas are beginning to move in here. In a 2016 opinion piece in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, I proposed a National Algorithms Safety Board. It was a way of provoking discussion, which it did, but I think the future that's unrolling is that each agency like FDA and FTC and FEC, each of them are developing their own expertise in providing independent oversight. The government regulation, which is seen by many as a limitation to automation, is not necessarily the case. In fact, we see just the opposite in the history of automobile efficiency, fuel efficiency, and safety, where government regulations led to an enormous growth of innovation for fuel efficiency and for safety. So I can't talk about all of it, but I'm going to focus just on a couple of ideas in the remaining minutes here around teams and software engineering practices. There are 5 in the of the 15 of them are in this category, and I'm going to focus tonight on just 2 of them, 2 of favorites of mine. So the first one is audit trails and analysis tools, and the idea is to learn from civil aviation, where the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder have contributed greatly over the past 50, 60 years towards improving civil aviation. And the notion of a flight data recorder for every robot is a sort of compact way of saying it. And the notion is, the basic notion and the intention for flight data recorders was retrospective analysis of failures, which in fact the National Transportation Safety Board, uses greatly. Now, actually in the Tesla crash of 2016, there's a very readable 60-page report from the NTSB that you might want to take a look at. And at the end, its recommendations include they want better recording of data from Tesla, that they could not sufficiently reconstruct the aspects of that crash in 2016, that deadly crash, because they just didn't have enough information. So I would say a very interesting research question is what should go into an audit trail, a product log, so that you can have retrospective forensic analysis of failures. Okay. Now, it turns out that in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years, there's 2 additional benefits have come from analyzing the flight data recorders. MITRE Corporation collects all the flight data recorder results after every flight. And the first is the understanding of near misses. It's pretty interesting to see how pilots actually prevented a disaster by what they did. What was the situation that led to the problem, and how did they get to stop the the crash from happening. And so you can make heroes from the flight data recorder analysis stream and the tools that provide analysis. The second big payoff is that the analysis gives you information to support preventive maintenance. And so the instrumentation on board every engine and in the flight surfaces and in the structural controls of the plane will begin to decay over time. And understanding how they're decaying and where failures occur give you the evidence you need to do preventive maintenance and make aircraft further safe. I might say I want to add one more generalization to the audit trail, which is the idea of incident reporting. And that we should have, as we do for aviation, public ways to report incidents. But the idea of AI incident database is a wonderful one, and it has been implemented by Sean McGregor, working for Partnership on AI. In fact, Wired magazine this week has a story about that. But take a look at the AI incidents database. There's already 1,000 reports about failures of AI systems. And that's the basis when we need to understand what goes wrong and how to do it right, okay? And that's what the insurance companies want, and that's what the auditing companies need to try to understand what the risk portfolio is. So I'm a big fan of audit trails, product logs, and the idea of a flight data recorder. It's something that we can contribute from software engineering and user interface and good design because we need to develop these tools and also the analysis tools that go with them. When a 777 crosses the Atlantic, it generates apparently about a petabyte of data. And so you need software tools to analyze and make sense. Visualization is, of course, a preferred strategy. And the last major point here is about explainable user interfaces, a very much HCI topic. It's great satisfaction that in the past 7-8 years, the AI community has gone very strongly into explainable AI. XAI, as DARPA coined it in their XAI program that supports 11 projects working on developing explainable AI systems. And this is really important, not just for those who use the system, but for the developers. It turns out once you begin to have an explainable system, you understand what it's doing wrong. And so one of the strong beneficiaries of explainability are those who develop and design those systems. Most of the work, the thousands of papers on explainable AI focus on retrospective explanations, post hoc explanations. So user has used the AI, they get a result from it, like a mortgage loan rejection or a college admissions rejection or a parole rejection. And they say, why? And how can I change so I get an acceptance? And the discussion in this field is very rich and focuses mostly on whether it's local explanations, that is specific examples for that use case, or global explanations. How does the AI system work? How does even the neural network and rather larger issues. But that idea, I must say I'm quite disappointed by what I see. And maybe you can help me because I've been looking for a good example of a user interface screenshot that I can put in the book to show a good post hoc analysis, a good post hoc explanation system. They typically are, portrayed as giving a textual description. They don't describe about query in depth. Some have done that, and there's very little evaluation about whether they're effective or not. And so I became increasingly concerned that this retrospective approach was not working. I was further motivated by Cynthia Rudin's work at Duke University. She's got a great paper, very punchy, written in wonderful style, in Nature Machine Intelligence that says, stop explaining black box models. Stop explaining black box models. Her approach to this idea of preventing the need for retrospective analysis is to have simplified models that were easily understandable. I think that's a good idea. My approach to this is to prevent confusion and the surprise that necessitates post hoc explanation by having prospective user interfaces, or we might call them anti-hoc, one of the terms as opposed to post hoc. And the prospective user interface would be interactive, visual, and exploratory, and let you find the boundaries of the model so you can understand what you need to do to get the result you want. Let me show you. This would be an example of a post hoc report. For a mortgage simplified case, you put in mortgage amount requested, $375,000, household monthly income, liquid assets, and you click submit. And you get a post hoc explanation. We're sorry, your mortgage loan was not approved. You might be approved if you reduce the mortgage amount requested, increase your household monthly income, or increase your liquid assets. I would say good, but not great. It's good because at least it gives you some explanation, but it's not great because you really don't know what to do next. You don't know how much you need to reduce the mortgage amount or how much increase your household monthly income or your liquid assets, getting money from an uncle or somebody. And so you also don't get to understand the sensitivity analysis. I mean, is a small amount of increase in liquid assets a better idea than an increase in monthly income? Which are the variables that matter the most? Okay, so my approach would be a prospective user interface where users could adjust sliders to report their situation. They would indicate the amount requested, and if they moved it to a lower mortgage amount, their score would go up. And they know the goal is to get to the score, the green line, the score for approval. They could move if they could increase their household monthly income, they could see their score going up. Or if they could increase their liquid assets, they could see how far they need to go. And they can play with these sliders to understand the realities of their performance. This is a simplified model. It's imperfect. It doesn't work for the case of thousands or millions of attributes, but those would be handled in somewhat more imaginative ways. But this is a simple model that I want to suggest to you. And it's being increasingly used in lightweight situations like recommenders, where this is a delightful website set up by a group of British librarians. I've been in touch with them, and they were making recommendations for readers of novels. And they had a set of scales or sliders on the left. You could choose up to 4 of them, and you could slide between funny and serious, between beautiful and disgusting, no sexual content, explicit sexual content, optimistic versus bleak. And as you move these sliders, the set of covers you get to see on the screen changes immediately within 100 milliseconds. That rapid update gives you the feedback, and so you get to know what's happening. This kind of interface has been studied in about 25 different applications. A simple newspaper recommender had 3 sliders for politics, sports, and entertainment. And as you moved, if you got less politics and more sports, then you got a lot of recommendations for sports articles. And that kind of giving user control over the features is what I'm talking about, of the high degree of user control. At the same time, there's a high degree of automation providing those recommendations. Same idea applies. This is a music recommender which uses 5 of the 14 Spotify attributes of songs: acousticness, instrumentalness, danceability, valence, and energy. And as you move them, the algorithm updates the highlights and which songs you get to see. There's another example from the OECD about Better Life Index, which gives you a bunch of sliders. You can explore the impact on the model. So that's the pitch here. And so I just want to come to a little summary and just remind you that this model of human-centered AI, this is the basis for the book that I mentioned. That's January 2022. And the 3 components I've talked about are the HCAI framework, the design metaphors, and the governance structures. And tonight I've talked about 2 of the examples of the 15 items in this paper that's in the ACM Transactions on Interactive Intelligent Systems, October 2020. This is free and open and accessible, so you can take a look at that. And here are the links for the paper, for those 3 key papers that focus on the 3 ideas, and then some more overview summary papers that may be useful to some of you. My own commentary and links and the outline of the book are on my website. I provided the slides to the organizers. I hope they'll post them. And so that would enable people to take a look. And just a final thing, if you want to stay in touch and find out more, I've been running a Google group, which now we've crossed 1,000 people who have signed up for this on human-centered AI. You can sign up for that. Go to that Google group website, human-centered-AI. We have a Twitter account with a much smaller number of followers, so please follow us. And actually, we're looking for a little help. If someone wants to help run the Twitter account, we need a little bit of help to get that going. There's a few people working on this, but we need some more help. And there's a website which has resources and information on events and university research groups and NGOs and activities that are going on. It's a huge and exciting time for me, and it's great to see that human-centered ideas are gaining strength. So join us there, and just remember, the future is human-centered. So thank you, Ted, and everyone for joining in on this. And I'll stop sharing here and let Ted pick it up and give Peter his chance to comment.
Sure. Ben, as usual, very articulate, such a beautiful talk. And there will be a recording of this on our website. So don't worry that you didn't get to, write all those things down that Ben talked about that were so interesting and useful. Let me turn it over to Peter for a few minutes for the first set of things. And as soon as he's done, I want to make sure everybody that wants to has an opportunity to ask questions. I want to mention that on the chat window, we've been having a very exciting conversation. Lots of people joining in. I just love watching that. And thank you for everyone contributing to that. So Peter, what do you think of this?
Okay, well, first, thanks, Ben. That was great. And great, as Ted said, because it's a very compelling talk, and also because I agree with most of it. So that's what makes it good. I think human-centered is important. I've been working with the People Plus AI research group at Google. I believe in of the people, for the people, and by the people. So of people mean we should really care about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and the people that do AI. For the people, we should worry about fairness and discrimination. And by the people, we should be broader, right? So we shouldn't just have programmers on the team. There should be ethicists and sociologists and UX and participatory design with the users and so on. Because we're doing it for these users, so that's what should be there. I think there's a history of this. You touched on some of it. It goes back to this dichotomy between artificial intelligence versus intelligence augmentation that Doug Engelbert was talking about. Right, so he had this idea that we should build these power tools, and also back to the schism between expert systems and intelligence assistants, where back in the 80s and 90s, the idea was, well, AI should build expert systems that completely replace humans, and thankfully we've largely given up on that and gone more towards the intelligence assistant approach. I like these 2 dimensions of human control versus automation rather than a single slider. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of flexible autonomy, and that you should ask, what can you do, and also what must you do, right? So I might be lazy one day and want my computer to do everything for me. And I might be, like wanting to practice my piano and saying, no, I don't want any automation anymore. I want to take over. And sometimes I may want to be in between. You reminded me, I was on another Zoom recently with Danny Kahneman, talking about his new book, Noise, which says, everybody talked about this idea of bias, but in statistics, there's also noise as well as bias. And he went in and he asked executives, he mentioned insurance executives, that's some of his biggest clients. And he asked them, you know, if you gave the same problem to two assessors, how much would they vary in the dollar amount they'd assess to it? And all the executives says, oh, you know, they'll be off by 10% or so. And all the companies that turned off, they were off by 50%, not by 10%. And the executives had no idea. So this idea of external oversight, I think, is really important because internally we're just not cutting it, right? We say we want to do a better job, and certainly I've seen a revolution where we're doing, you know, I think Eric Schmidt's right. We're doing so much better now. Maybe it just meant we were doing really bad years before, where, you know, in the old days, it was just push the product out as fast as you can. And now there's this many steps to go through of reviews for privacy and equity and fairness and discrimination and everything else. So we're getting better at it, but we could use some help. This idea of people working together, I think, is important. I wanted to say, you know, it was only a couple of years ago that people were talking about this idea of centaur chess, which was, you know, some humans are really good at chess, some computers are really good at chess, but it turned out for a while that a team of humans and computers was better than everybody. And I said at the time, yeah, that's only because nobody's written a program to control other chess programs. And if they did, I'm pretty sure that program would do better. But they didn't do that because it's no fun. It's more fun to play chess either as a human or with the computers. And I think the history of computer chess bore that out, because in the last 2 years we had some advances, and the centaurs can no longer keep up. And I think there will be, you know, I like all your examples are great, and there should be humans in the loop for all of those, but there will be problems for which it's hard for humans to keep up and to be a real participant in the dialogue. They should still be there in a checking role, but they may not be able to be in the loop as much. I think the idea of visualization is really important, and we should do more work on that. There's a lot of things we don't know how to do. Jeff Hinton is famous for saying, well, you know, in these neural nets, we're dealing with these huge dimensional spaces. And somebody asked him, well, how do you visualize a 14-dimensional hyperplane? And he says, well, it's easy. You just visualize a 3D space and say the word 14 to yourself very loudly and confidently. And he says, that's what everybody does. And it's true. Our visual system is good at 2 and 3D, but we start failing beyond that. We can't do these things. And yes, we could build better visualizations to get us part of the way there, but it won't get us all the way there. On explainability, I think you have a good take on it. You know, so one thing is, Einstein said that we should make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. And if there is no good, simple explanation, giving one isn't going to help. And I think in a lot of cases, explanations are kind of post hoc rationalizations. So I think, you know, when I go to the doctor and say, what's wrong with me? And she gives me a diagnosis, and then I say, why? She'll give me an answer. But I think what's happening is the diagnosis was done sort of subconsciously based on her decades of experience. And then the explanation is, okay, now I'll go back to med school and I'll pull up all the relevant facts that support my preconceived conclusion, and I'll sort of not emphasize the ones that don't support it. So I think that's a problem. I think explaining things by simpler models with rules can be a problem, because by making it simpler like that, sometimes you may leave out the things that are really important. And people say, yeah, neural nets are hard because they're just a bunch of numbers that you add up, whereas things like decision trees are better models. I think that's Cynthia Rudin, which I definitely like her paper. I think she's onto something. But I think it's not always the case that a rule-based system or a decision tree can give you a good explanation. Because if rules really worked and were easy to understand, then traditional software, which is made out of rules, out of if-then else's, wouldn't have any bugs in it. And we know traditional software does have bugs in it, even though it has if statements that are supposedly easy to understand. And why don't they work? Well, because the programmer writes if A and B, then do X, and everybody looks at that and says, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then one case comes along and it no longer makes any sense. And they say, oh, well, yeah, I meant if A and B, but of course not also C. Of course this rule doesn't apply if C is the case. But that wasn't written down in the rules. So that's the problem with rules, is that they leave out those sort of externalities. I really like all those examples with the sliders. I think those are very good ways of interacting. I do worry, though, if you make that loan application interface available, now once people start playing with that, now you're solving a different problem. You're solving the problem of approving a loan after an adversary can play with it and figure out exactly how much they have to either lie or, if I just apply for 3 more credit cards, then I'll get the loan. So your former data is no longer any good, and you're now in an adversarial game theoretic situation, which is not impossible, but it's just something else you have to deal with. I really like the idea of having conversational systems. I don't want a system that just gives me an explanation. I want a system that I can talk to and say, well, what if this, what if that? And I like the idea that basically we're trying to establish trust. Sorry for the dogs in the background. They're trying to be a respondent as well. So I think trust rather than explanation is what I would go for, and having people in the loop, having this complex social structure of review boards and legal and so on. I think those all help to build trust, but there's no one way to do it all on its own. And I agree with Ted, there's great conversation in the chat, so let's throw it open to all those people.
I want to start.
Peter. Let me just respond. Thank
I think that's right. That's right. It's Ben's turn to respond.
Your generous response and supportive comments. And I really do think the Google pair, People in AI research group has done wonderful. Fernanda Villegas and Martin Wattenberg, especially. I think Fernanda has shown the great power of visualization tools for the developers themselves. And I think that revealing what works and what doesn't work is really important. And the 14-dimensional space is a bit of a problem, but we can do something with that. So we can at least find out which of the dimensions are really the most effective. There's many forms of dimension reduction algorithms, and some are better than others. And I like parallel coordinates sometimes, and I especially like the hierarchical clustering algorithm strategies that really do reveal the key properties that show you which variables are important. And we've done that with about 150 dimension spaces. So I can see it working up to around there. I don't have a quick answer for the 1,000,000 dimension spaces, but we can do it. You used a very nice term that I hadn't heard before, flexible autonomy. And the huge discussion about autonomous systems troubles me. And and then calling it assured autonomy or trustworthy autonomy just seems to reiterate in an unhelpful way. But Daniela Roos and others are talking about shared autonomy, parallel autonomy, distributed autonomy, and you gave a nice one today of flexible autonomy. And I just begin to worry that autonomy itself is a dangerous term, because it still suggests that the machine is going to do it and that the responsibility may be in the machine. I think the word that we need to post and maybe put it up in neon lights in every programmer's room says responsibility across it. Or maybe, it just needs to be more clear. And I should say companies are moving towards that. The AI 360 toolkits from IBM are pretty admirable. And just this week, they announced their uncertainty quantification 360 toolkit, but their fairness and other toolkits are a good thing. I should say Google's and Microsoft's effort on, the model cards, data sheets for data sets, other ways of documenting and clarifying who's responsible, who did what, and making that a publicly and more visible document is going to help a lot. So those are other forms of safety culture that I think will have benefits. Anyway, thank you again for your comment. I agree with your cautionary, and you're saying not always, that the methods I propose don't always work. Yeah, I don't say they always work, but they do give a clue, I hope, to the imaginative designs that this community and others may develop in the coming years. So that's the starting point for opening up a fresh way of thinking. That's my hope. So thanks again, Peter. Do you want to say anything further, maybe?
No, let's let somebody else talk.
Yeah,
All right.
I would like to encourage, thank you very much, both of you. And Ben, I thought those were really interesting words. I often think about not just flexible autonomy, but mixed initiative is an older term that we talk about a lot. So I want to, I'm going to probably ask the first question post Peter, but then I want everybody that can to turn on their videos if you want. And I have a little list of people that have put things in the chat. That's where I'm going to draw them from, unless there's some that I miss. Other people will help me with that. I guess my first thing I wanted to talk about, just for an instant, is I think of it, a tool, as something that helps us do something that we couldn't have done without it, or that makes us do it better than we could have without it. And it makes me think in terms of this conversation relative to, is this about AI we're talking about, or is this all of technology that everything that you're talking about, Ben, relates to? So that's the question I'd like to lead with.
I would say, yeah, it's about all technologies. I think we need to weave in the people who design many different kinds of technologies. The interest in AI is so enormous, though, these times. It's driving almost every field, and it's so pervasive that I think the focus is appropriately on AI. The remarkable worldwide interest in AI is shifting every technology. So that's why I took the focus here on human-centered AI. I didn't say human-centered technology, which would be a reasonable thing to say. So, yeah, you make a good point.
Well, I mean, it's a very, there's a lot of broadly applicable thoughts here. That's all I'm saying. Michael Worth asked, put in the first message, and I want everybody to keep their comments very, very short, because we have a lot of interest this evening, and we will go on a little while. But Michael, do you want to unmute and ask your question, possibly?
Sure. A couple of years ago, when we were still meeting together in physical space, and an earlier Bay-Kai session, I surprised myself by being a bit shrill in one of my questions, and I think Ted was surprised too, and suggesting that online social networks are all not goodness and joy, that there might be some malfeasance or bad actors who took advantage of those things. And as I look at your model, Ben, it seems that you currently don't have incorporated in it the possibility of different communities with different metrics, for example, for evaluating things, who have, who are at war with each other over the results of an algorithm or an AI prediction. So for example, when you had your let me give you a counterexample. Sorry, there's a book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind, which is a sociologist, and he lays out a set of basis functions for evaluating moral issues that differ between right and left. Well, get back to your dimension reduction scheme. The right and the left evaluate moral things differently. How does that fit into your AI model?
Very legitimate question. Yes, and your starting point about that we believed that social media would give enable people at the margins to have a voice in discussion, but we never dreamed how dangerous that would turn out to be, that it would give great power to people to misuse it in very compelling ways. And so I think you're right to point us into the cautionary tale, and your approach to it suggests there are people with different moral approaches. And Jonathan Haidt's book is an excellent one. It really opened my eyes to very different ways of thinking and seeing. And the only thing I can say here, the thing I felt always about technology, yes, technology can be put to work in bad ways. And I think the greatest danger about AI is that the malicious actors I identified in the early slides become empowered as well. The oppressive governments and political leaders, the terrorists, the criminals, and so on, they become empowered, as we're seeing with ransomware attacks and so on. So, how can we really make it safe? We can't make it safe. But what we can do is work as best we can to try to predict all the situations that can go bad. So, and a good example of a model is MITRE Corporation's attack model. And their attack database has 300 strategies of cybersecurity attack. It's an open website. You can find it. I think attack.mitre.org, you might get it. But it's a way of helping the community anticipate some of the possibilities. And it will be creative criminals and oppressive parties who will find yet new ways. But if we have an open system, the open reporting of near misses and failures, and the continuous discussion, we have a chance of stopping it from happening too wildly. I'm very influenced by the writings of Charles Perrault in his 1980 book called Normal Accidents. He has later books, but I find that one to be the best one. And he, points to the dangers, and he's maybe more pessimistic because he does not believe you can prevent accidents, that there will be continuing forms of accident. Others who have promoted notions of high reliability organizations, resilience engineering, and safety cultures tend to come across somewhat more optimistically. And I tend to be an optimistic type, and I'd like to see that our community do its best we can to anticipate the problems and then have an open reporting scheme by which, when problems emerge, we can get to them soon and stop them from spreading faster. That's my best response.
It's a great response.
One quick addition to that is,
Michael, we really want to get to other people. Is that all right?
yeah, please,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. So Suresh Joshi, could you speak a little bit? You had a couple of questions.
Yeah, hey, I'm a big fan of both the speakers today. I have Peter's book here and Ben's work. Also, I heard Ben's talk 2 years ago, I think, at Stanford HCI, where he gave similar version early, I think, his work around this talk. And it opened my mind when I saw it's not just the one plane where we say it's autonomous and it's, human labor and system is totally, and now like that 2x2 thinking in 2 axes really allowed my thinking that it can be both in that quadrant. My one question is, from the UI perspective, I've been a UI designer, UI engineer, and as my job, I play with a lot of UI toolkits. I think what we need is a UI toolkit for intelligent, so we can build intelligent interfaces like, buttons and sliders and controls. And what would the AI version of these be like, where there is some autonomy, there is some intelligence, and there is agency as well? Any idea around that?
Well, I would go very delicately about that. I get worried about terms like intelligent or, and autonomous systems. So, there are ideas. So, for example, the sliders, there are many variations on the sliders. One of them, the early one, was called scented controls, like the scent, the smell. And it shows you within the slider bar information that gives you an indication of what would happen if you explored parts of that design space. So there are ways you can visually present information about it. And, you know, the notion of making recommendations is also reasonable. It's quite sensible that you could invoke a recommender, which would say, hey, choose the set of sliders if you were, let's say, buying a house and you had a whole set of attributes. And you said, you know, you had a high level concept of what you wanted, and then it would set some of the sliders to give you feedback. So I think there are ways to do it. I think we need to break out from our current restricted imagination to see better ideas. And I think those are possible. And I get excited when I see a new design, a new interface that offers a better way of doing e-commerce or doing website traversal. So go to it. Send me your best examples.
Ted, can I respond to that?
Yeah, I was in fact, I was going to ask you, and what I want to say is that Peter gave a talk a lot about tools for creating AI systems a couple of years ago that I enjoyed a lot. So Peter, what do you want to say?
So one of the things that's really interesting to me is these speech assistants. And, you know, if you told me a few years ago, I got a great idea for a computer, I'm going to throw away the screen and the mouse and the keyboard, and it's just going to be a microphone and a speaker, I would have said, that's crazy. That makes it worse in every way. So now you know why I'm not a product designer, because those things are being built and people like them and they can do a few things, but we're sort of at this plateau where we don't know how to get them to the next level, right? So I can ask them for recipes and to play music and set a timer and tell me the weather and so on. And I could probably give you a dozen more, but after that, I'm kind of stuck. And after that, I don't know what else I can say and what's going to work and what's not going to work. So we're going to have to figure out a way without affordances of menus of here's what you can do, to just say, well, what can I say to this speaker, and what is it going to be able to do, and is that going to be one answer for the whole industry, or is it going to be one answer for Siri and one answer for Alexa and one answer for Google, and you'll have to remember who you're talking to. I think we haven't figured that out yet. It's an opportunity because it opens things up to third-party apps that are much more lightweight than apps and maybe could interact together better, but we haven't built that yet. And so that's an exciting opportunity to me.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I support the idea of voice. I would call them voice user interfaces, and I'm impressed also by how fast the quality of speech recognition and also question answering has proceeded. And yes, the issue of habitability, of how do you get people to know what questions are possible and what's not possible, is really a challenging one. I think Amazon had a pretty good approach. Once a week, I get an email with a dozen suggestions of, Alexa, tell me a joke, or things like that, that opened up my eyes. And so I think it'll be useful that way. Voice assistants can be helpful.
Yeah. There's actually, I was thinking about a nice list that Peter put together too, and the tools for debugging and actually exploring available, things that you have to work with are a good idea, Suresh, and there are a lot of people working on that as well. I want to move on to Daniel Irwin. Do you have a moment to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks. So I was heavily influenced by this book from the 80s, I think, by Hubert Dreyfus, What Computers Still Can't Do, kind of just a negative review of what had come before. It was in the middle of the AI winter. I still feel like we see a lot of that, especially with like Tesla's, the way it bills its features as like self-driving, even though it's like, well, it doesn't drive itself. You have to keep driving, but they don't really put that into the name. I wonder, I see this in your design metaphors, you're like guiding us then to use a little bit like more modest ways of describing this, all this functionality. So that seems really great to me. How does that fit into the overall history of this AI thing? And I mean, obviously even the name artificial intelligence, like we haven't gotten there yet. Like, how does that fit into this arc and this greater arc of history?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI, just the term, as you point out, is compelling, and the notions of an intelligent agent, of an autonomous device, a humanoid or social robot. It's just compelling ideas. And I think we'll continue to see, social robots as entertainment. I'm not sure that we're going to have little social robots following us around at home or picking up the dishes or, cleaning the floor. I mean, we have a Roomba. It's not humanoid. I mean, if you break free from that, you go on. I guess I'm pretty influenced. I just picked it up again. Where is it? Here we are. I just wanted to go back to it. Whoops, no, there we are. Oh, drifting in and out.
Some AI is getting in the way.
The magic invisible book.
Yeah, they're AI at work
There we
again.
go. Lewis Mumford, 1934, Techniques in Civilization. And here it is. It's just a wonderful readable history. It's like poetry for 600 pages of technology. And he had a gift for me here. It's called The Obstacle of Animism. You can't see that. And he just talks about just what you're describing, which is the evolution of our thinking. That we initially start by making the assumption that technology will resemble human or animal forms. And that's a good start. But that limits your thinking. And the line that I just quoted today, the most ineffective kind of machine is the realistic mechanical imitation of a man or another animal. Okay? And for thousands of years, animism has stood in the way of development. It has concealed the entire face of nature behind a scroll of human forms. It goes on, but it's just really quite an interesting story. And I think the evolution will be to break free from those early bio-inspired notions, okay? That, sure, we start by thinking of plane as a bird flapping its wings, okay? Or we think about robots as having feet, but we come to know pretty soon that wheels are actually a lot better. 4 wheels are probably better than 2 feet for a lot of things. Or a treaded robot is going to be a better way, okay? And Boston Dynamics, which did these terrific and entertaining, robots, has moved on to versions which are with wheels and doing other kind of things because it holds you back when you think of it as as a humanoid social agent. And Cliff Nass, a dear buddy at Stanford who sadly died a few years ago, way too early, but we used to love to argue. And his studies during the 90s that showed that people responded socially to computers led to the so-called computers as social actors, CASA theory, which suggested that the best way to design was to design a robot to be like a person. Well, that's the trap. That's sadly NASA's fallacy. And Mumford's vision tells us that we shouldn't get stuck in the idea. We can start with bio-inspired, but get past it and think about the things that computers can do. They're very quick. They have superhuman sensors. They've got terrific and rapid performance. They've got huge databases. They have powerful effectors, and they have large screen, high resolution displays to show lots of information. People don't do that, don't have it. But computers and visual displays are, I think, a very powerful way, and that we're slowly learning how to put them to work. So that's why the language of super tools, active appliances, telebots, and control centers, to me, represent, I don't think of them as more modest at all. I think of them as realistic and really open up your mind to fresh possibilities.
I just want to say in terms of the branding of names of fields, artificial intelligence has this sexy, evocative name, and operations research has the most boring name possible. And yet they're almost the same field. They're both about computing optimal actions. So there you go.
Yeah. I guess I would, I just want to add and move on, which is that, really people do respond and are in social intercourse at all times. And people like Andrea Tomas, Cynthia Brazil have worked hard on that. And I think the jury's out about whether we move beyond, beyond social to doing better with always functional I think it's probably a dance. But in any case, Lisa
Want to
Rose
make a
has.
bet, Ted?
I will. But what's our bet?
It's tough to write a bet, but
Oh,
I'm
well,
up for it.
we've got our bet and it's public. Okay. So Lisa Rose has a next, had asked a question. Do you have a chance to get on and ask your question, Lisa?
I have no idea what I don't know.
Okay. See,
I'm going to
okay.
leave this to you.
Okay. All right.
Your chat line says you love explorable explanations. Was that what was on your mind?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not a question. I just, I like the idea, I think.
What do
I
you
thought it
like
was
about
great.
them?
Because as a learner, I'm a teacher and a constant student. And this is how I learn stuff, and my students learn stuff as well. It's experimenting, thought experiments. And it's through those thought experiments that I've seen it with my students, come to understand how things work. And once they understand how something works, then they know what to change in order to get the results they want.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Steve Greshhaber had presented a question. Do you have can you come on and ask it? Still with us?
I think he had to go.
Okay, and I know that Vidya also had a question, had to go, but Zach Tosh, I don't even know how to pronounce your last name. You had a question, right? There's a Zach.
Toshidon, I imagine.
Yeah.
Let's
Are you
work with
still
him.
here with us? And if not, it's getting a little late. I know that Smitha put something forward also. Smitha, do you want to ask a question or say something?
Uh-oh. I'm always in the middle of having dinner at this time, but I will ask. So one of the things that I feel like is so pervasive is everything that I watch, everything that I do, everything that I browse seems very tailored to me. And it's that notion of, like end users are not exposed to the black box, so they don't know why I'm seeing this, but it almost feels like the system knows you. And they end up acting like echo chambers, right? And, are there any principles that teams, and organizations can use to avoid this and, just keep us in our biases, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. In a way, we do want our filter bubbles and we do want to be in communities that we share an interest with. But the question is, how do we encourage people to explore beyond the bounds of what they have? And I think, recommender systems could do that, but I wouldn't impose a recommender system that required you to spend 10% of your time exploring outside your filter bubble. That would seem to be problematic. So there is a real moral dilemma. I think you can have, the question of how do we have open discourse, I think and how do we have safe discourse that's free. There's one idea that Mark Smith, I mentioned him earlier, from Social Media Research Foundation, and I have put into a short, proposal opinion piece that we're trying to get out there, which is that on Twitter or Facebook, you should be able to appoint an editor for you. That if you could designate certain people or accounts to be editors, then if they block somebody, it's blocked for you. So if you think you're sympathetic to the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, and you appoint them to be your editor, one of your editors, they would have the incentive then to block or limit or question other postings, then you would get the benefit of that. And so that kind of social process of appointing editors would be a way of cleaning up the kind of nasty discourse that happens. And once you have a system in place with editors, it would begin to discourage people from making the kind of violent and angry behaviors that we see on social media, because they would be edited by powerful groups. And so you could appoint anyone to be your editor, but of course you might choose large groups which would devote the effort to limiting the nasty discourse. So that's a little bit of a solution.
That's a very interesting point. So at this point, we've been going for a while, and I just want to make sure that anybody that hasn't spoken yet might come forward that we haven't thought of. And please, just reflect. I mean, Ben, as you can see, is very versatile in his thinking about these things, and it's really a special chance here. So one last curtain call for everybody.
I nominate Mary Parks, who just put a new question in the chat.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah, my question was about, so I work in speech technology, and I really like the visualizations of sliders. That idea is great. And there's always been this problem with speech technology. It's a probabilistic input, and people don't ever get a sense of why sometimes it works, why it doesn't, or it might work for some group of people better than it does for some other group of people. And so then I was thinking about sliders as a way of letting people explore how these types of inputs work. So I was just wondering if there was any comment on that or any thoughts.
So you want to tie the sliders in with voice user interfaces?
Well, not in the user interface itself, but more like, people don't understand how speech works, that it's not, that there are confidence scores, and that there could be all kinds of different factors that would influence what that score is for the input itself. And so maybe a way of using sliders for the input system itself, sliders that would show just one thought that comes to mind, for example, dialects. So maybe there is a lack of dialect coverage. So maybe there's a way of letting people play with seeing how dialect coverage is lacking, for example, and how to change where locations of speakers are. So if you change the location, or age or gender, or anything that would be affecting how well the model performs, could those kinds of sliders be used as a way for people to just become familiar? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I now understand your question or your point better, which is that you want to focus, you're not so much about the content of what Siri or Alexa says, but you're interested in controlling its model itself. And so you may have had some bad experiences that it didn't do well with you, but it did well with your friends or your children. And so you want to adjust it in some way that you
or even for developers or people who are working in it and becoming familiar with how to influence.
Right. So again, those are two extremes on the point. You could get people to make their own slider adjustments for their voice assistants, which only a small number of people would do, or you could get the developers to get better at it. But there's a middle ground which says, okay, I am, I come from India and I speak with a strong accent. Well, maybe there would be an Indian association of Indians in America, in the US, that would work on the strategy and be able to make those adjustments for you, and you could sign into their model, and then you'd get a better model. So it's somewhat, there are flexibilities that you can get with these voice user assistants, that you can ask for different kinds of speakers, and you want different kind of listeners. You want them to accommodate to different styles of listeners, right? Is that the idea? So I think there may be room for intermediate groups to take this up.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fascinating idea. And I think I love the idea of playing with the model and giving people control over the model if it can be done. So with that, I guess I'm feeling as though we've been going on quite a while this evening, and I'm loving this conversation. Ben, I want to say that our chat thing that was going on during your talk was really quite rich. I'm sure you didn't have time to look at that, but it was I think I think people were very deeply engaged in this talk. It was fantastic to have you and Peter both here, and I appreciate everybody coming, and I want you to consider bringing friends and coming back in the future, all of you. So with that, thank you for a lovely evening, all of you, and I'm happy to see you today, and I hope to see you again next month.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Nancy, Steve Williams, the whole team at the heroic Bay Kai community. And thank you, Peter, especially
thank you,
for
everybody.
being such a good discussant,
Okay.
supporter of this. I appreciate it all. Thanks to the whole bunch.
Thank
I'll
you.
be back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. This was great.
Okay.
Yeah. Good going.
Thanks, Ben.
Okay,
Thanks,
guys,
Ted.
I'm
That
gonna
was
end
good.
this. Yeah, I thought it was great fun. Thanks so much for the great talk.
All right. No, I'm glad.
Lots of interesting people came. Yeah, I
I
thought
was
so too.
pleased with it too.
Yeah, very smooth and great reactions. I thought, Peter, you said you were going to talk for a moment, but you had so many important and valuable things to say.
Yeah, sorry if I went on too long.
No,
No. It was a great discussion. I made notes from your comments
Can I
as
ask
well.
a quick question? Could I ask a
Yeah.
quick question?
Who's there?
For
Lisa.
this is Lisa, the blue face. I don't have any light here. Lisa, the camera wouldn't work.
Yeah,
even.
quickly.
That's me with the blue
Yeah, we
face.
got you.
Yeah, Peter.
Mhm.
Is the shirt with the dots that are colored like Google's colors? Did you wear that on purpose?
Yeah, I have a lot of colored shirts, and this one is. I did notice that this was somewhat googly. Yes.
That's very googly. Okay, that's it.
Peter's signature
background is
trademark
broader,
is
right?
Yeah.
is
So
his
the
colorful shirts.
background is from the movie Arrival, which is about trying to communicate through a screen without getting infected. So I thought that was appropriate for current days.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize it. From here, it looks like a heart-shaped logo
Yeah,
of some
you know,
kind, but I
here,
see it.
right,
There
there's-
we go.
Yes, the
Okay.
magically
Yeah,
wise.
it's great.
Yeah.
I love that movie too.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all.
Good night then. Okay.
I think I'll check
Right.
out for now.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hope to talk to you soon.
Shut the shit down, man.
Thank you.